As said, my name is Bernhard Frank. I work for Microsoft. I work within the German subsidiary, which is where the main headquarter in Germany is based in Munich or close by Munich. And I'm within the hosting team. So our team, or my team, is taking care about the service providers that are reporting or using the service provider license agreement, SPLA, and this revenue that is, or the, our team has the responsibility for this revenue. So right after lunch, this is the sponsor presentation. So if you expect a 30-minute sales pitch with a lot of PowerPoint slides, you are wrong, okay? So don't be afraid. This is going to be a technical presentation. I'm a technician. I love to be a technician, and there have been no better times for a technician to be at Microsoft since the last 2 years. So many things are going on within the company. You could realize that we have a new openness regarding open source, regarding Linux. You may have experienced that a little bit now, and it's, I think, a wonderful time to work at Microsoft right now. One technology I'm bringing in is, or my focus now for this talk is Windows Server 2016, which is not released yet. Hopefully it will be later this year. But we do have currently technical previews out, which the current build is technical preview 4, and Windows Server 2016 brings something that is very interesting, especially for service providers and cloud application producers, which is the Nano Server. So before talking about what Nano Server really is, I want to talk about why we have a product like Nano Server. So the first thing is, of course, because of you. Customers told us that reboots are bad for their operations. This is not, rocket science. I mean, that's quite clear that, especially if you want to reboot or if you need to reboot your hypervisor, your virtualization host, that's bad, right? I mean, you lose a lot of time, or you have to invest time for administration, shifting the virtual machines that are sitting on that host to another host, right? Then patching this host, rebooting it, and then doing, as big as your farm is. So patching is necessary, but it's not very nice for the people to do, right? The other thing is the server images are too big. If you look at a Windows Server 2012 R2, fully patched, you may end up with 20 gigabytes of virtual hard disk size you need to carry over the network if you need to provision a new virtual machine, or if you need to provision a new host, right? 20 gig, you may say, well, that's not too big. But if you're a hyperscaler, if you're a large hoster that has not only tens of servers, but hundreds of thousands of servers, these big images can congest your network, right? So getting that stuff over the wire is not very nice, so it would be nice. And also, these images, they need to be stored somewhere, right? The less space they take, the better is, the less storage you need, the more money you save. Another thing is that we got back from customer is resource use is too big of a server, right? If I have Windows Server 2012 R2 that is only dedicated for running virtual machines with a Hyper-V roll-on, why do I need all the other stuff? Why do I need, for example, a GUI and whatever, right? So to make more use of a server means to get rid of some parts that you may not use for that specific purpose, right? And of course, we have that also the other thing, like security is all over the place, and security attacks all over the place. So wouldn't it be nice to have a server that is more secure than the previous ones? So that was the intention, to build a new, let's say, deployment option or way of consuming Windows Server vNext. So what is Nano Server? How does it look like? It's a server that is stripped down based to the components that you just need and nothing more. And in order to understand that product a little bit better, let's take a short look back into the history where we came from. This is really way back. With NT4, and Windows Server even better with 2003, we managed to separate the roles from the operating system, right? It was not always the case. With NT4, you sometimes had to, if you want to install features, you had to, you could either install it, you have to follow a certain installation rule, and then later on, if you want to remove something because something broke, it was really hard to do that, right? So what ended up, or what we did was we separated that with Windows Server 2000 and with 2003. But they all had a GUI, right? So the Linux guys are laughing at us because we always used to deliver and ship a server with a GUI, which is, well, sometimes nice from an administrative perspective. From a security perspective, maybe not, right? So what we ended up doing was in 2008, we produced, well, a different deployment option of Windows Server, which was the server core, right? You have the roles and features like the small squares on the top. You can install, deinstall the roles and features, and you can have a server without a GUI, more or less without the GUI, and the full server with the GUI, right? But you had to either decide at the deployment time which version you choose, right? You couldn't switch back from one to the other, which was really a huge drawback. Then this changed with the Windows Server 2012. We thought it might be a good idea to install the server first with the full GUI, install all the drivers to do the configuration of the environment, and then be able to strip off the GUI, remove the GUI components in order to have a reduced attack surface, right? So you could flow between these versions up and down. That was not a problem, but we still ended up with, well, some problems, which was server core is not very like to be used by most of the administrators that are known to Windows Server administration, because it brings some friction points with it. So even we go further with the Nano Server, and what is it? It's a new deployment option. So it's not like you mount the ISO file for Windows Server. You click through, you boot from it, and then you have the installation option for Nano Server. You won't find it there, right? You will see Windows Server with GUI, without GUI, data center variation with GUI, without GUI, but there is no Nano Server there, right? So we'd have to, the installation approach is a little bit different, and I'll show you in a later demo how to do that, right? So there is the Nano Server, which lives side by side to the other operating system, which is 64-bit only. And I show you right next how to get to your Nano Server. Meaning stripping off the GUI from a Windows Server was not a very easy task, right? So what they've done, the product teams and the ones that are doing the server roles and features had to go through the code and remove every component that had some relationship with the GUI. So that means you cannot do everything just in one shot, right? So there are roles and features that you would not find on a Nano Server, for example, right? Things and services that, for example, use GUI components, like Windows Terminal Services, for example, or Remote Desktop Services, as it is called right now. So currently there is no installation option for Remote Desktop Services on a Nano Server right now. But you can make a Nano Server domain controller. You could make it a hypervisor, right? So we'll see that just in a minute. It's extending the server core pattern. It's taking it further. What do I mean with this? When you use or when you install a Windows Server and you want to, you put out pure vanilla Windows server and you want to make it a web server or a hypervisor. It's just, you go into the GUI and you select the hypervisor role or the web server role, and next, finish, and maybe some reboots, and then you have your new feature on that server, right? With Nano Server, you'll never get asked for inserting any ISO files or installation media, right? The files, the binaries for the roles are sitting on the server that you've installed, right? So that takes space, and in case of a patch of a role vulnerability, you would have to patch that as well, right? With Nano Server, these DLLs, these components have been stripped off the server. So that means if you want to make a Nano Server, a web server, for example, you would need to put the packages for the web server into your Nano Server component. So that would mean that is the equivalent of getting some installation media attached to your Nano Server installation and activate that package, right? So there are some things that are different, meaning what shouldn't be different is the driver system, right? So Nano Server is supposed to have the same full driver support than you would have on a Windows server with GUI, right? But be aware of that, there will be no Windows installer support. No GUI means you cannot run any Windows installer files on that. You cannot hit next, finish, and you're gone, right? So you would have to have a driver that can be installed with a different installation option, right? So how far have we gone? Talking about the ideas and how it will be or how the server looks like is one thing, but what are the results so far is another. I bring up some graphs here that should show what they did was they took the critical and important security bulletins or patches that you would have to apply on a Windows server, right? And they were porting them back for a Nano Server. Fixtures Nano Server, they would look how many patches that I would have to apply on a full server would also need to be applied on a Nano Server, right? So from the critical security bulletins, we had 23 for a full server. We had 8 of these would have applied to a server core, and only 2 of them you would need to install on a Nano Server. Which also means, less patching means less reboots. So the number for the reboots was 11 for the full server compared to 3 on a Nano Server, which gives lesser reboots are better. It gives you more uptime. Okay, some other numbers. A little bit less drivers that are loaded on a Nano Server, which is in blue. The server core is the orange variant. A little bit less services running, and also only about 1/3 of the ports that are open on a pure vanilla system. Right? We hope to get better a little bit in the numbers with that. Boot I/O is reduced as well. Processes are a little bit less kernel memory that it is used. That is more in the discussion about the efficiency, right? And here's some numbers that I find very interesting. Is what is the setup time? How long does it take to install a new Nano Server? A Windows server, a server core, 300 seconds compared to 40 seconds on a Nano Server. The disk footprint is a little bit higher than 400 megabytes, I would say, but the order of magnitude is correct here. And if you put that on a VHD, you'll end up also in a very reduced size. So, how to install Nano Server? Let me go to a demo because I think you've seen already too much slides. Okay? Good. So how do you progress? I just said that Nano Server is not, you're not able to mount the ISO file, right, and then boot from it, and then see the Nano Server installation option. So what I've done is, you would have to do it a little bit different. So what I do is I've downloaded the technical preview of Windows Server 2016, which is this one. I mount it. This is the content of the installation media. And right there, there's a new path within the installation media, which is called Nano Server. And with that, that's the component that you need. You don't need all of these. You just need 2 PowerShell components that you copy over into a working directory, which I call temp right now. And then open up my PowerShell session, navigate into that directory, and I import a module, which is a container for for PowerShell commands. And now it is loaded. Now I have a new PowerShell commandlet. A commandlet is well, if you're not familiar with PowerShell, we have that syntax with an action separated with a dash, and then action versus or against something, you know. And I'm doing now the action new against something to create a Nano Server image. Okay, so basically what do I need to do? I need to specify a media path, which is my mounted ISO file. So it's the D drive. Then I need a working directory. And then I need the target path for the output of my Nano Server, which I place in mynano.vhdx. So it's a virtual hard disk. And then after that, I can, let me change the display here a little bit, so you can see the full line break. So it's a VHDX. And then I need to specify the language. ENUS is currently the only one that is supported right now because it's in technical preview. And then I can give it a name. My Nano 0815. And now I can specify the size of the VHDX. How much is the maximum size the virtual hard disk can be? 40 gigabytes. Yeah. And now I'm good to go. I'm getting asked for there's one thing I need to specify again, which is, should this Nano Server live on a physical box, then you would need to add some drivers on it, right? Should it be on a virtual machine, you would have to, or you would use the guest services, which are the integration components for the virtual machine, right? So I'll take these as well. Give it a name, or give it an administrative password, and then what happens is it will create a VHDX, which is based on a EFI partition layout. So that means it will be later on a generation 2 virtual machine, which is generation 2 virtual machine is one that is running on a UEFI virtualized or emulated UEFI motherboard rather than a BIOS emulated motherboard, right? But we'll do that later on, right? So my Nano Server is technical preview 4. It doesn't have an IP address right now, right? It does not serve any role. There's no web server role on it, nothing, right? So let's take a look at the Nano Server, how it looks like. So I'll open up my Hyper-V in the back, create a new virtual machine, give it a name, my Nano 815. Well, typo here, doesn't matter. So it is a generation 2 virtual machine, meaning no BIOS emulation, but a pure UEFI-based motherboard with secure boot and whatnot. And now the startup memory, well, leave it up to 1 gig. Use dynamic memory for that machine, so it can drop down to a lower value when it doesn't need the full memory. I'll hook it up to a network, and I attach a virtual hard disk later because I've just created a virtual hard disk. So let me copy my virtual hard disk, which I have here. Right. So from the size, you'll see that's 730 megabytes. Let's grab that, copy it over to the Nano server, place it here. Right. So copy this as a path and then go back to my virtual machine, hook it up as a hard drive, remove the colons, set apply. Now I want to change the boot order, not to boot from the network, but from the hard disk. So, and now we have a pure vanilla Nano server, which boots for the first time. That means it's like, fresh install. Look how long it's taking for the reboot or for the first installation phase. That's basically it, right? So you see in the circle running around, that took for the installation time, that was all it took, and now you have your Nano server up and running, which is the first Windows server, I would say, without the GUI. So let's see what you can do with it. Okay, so let's log on. Administrator, log on with the password. So that's basically it, right? There's nothing more or not much to do. Nano server should be completely managed remotely. Like the guys, from if you're using VMware and you say, well, that's maybe not nothing new, but for a Windows server, this is it really is. Okay, so what can I do here? I just can add an IP address to that box. I can add some firewall rules in order to remotely connect to that virtual machine in order to manage it. Right? That's basically it. Okay. So, in order to make that machine a web server, right, what would you need to do then? You would have to add a package you would have to add the web server binaries from remote to that box. So let's do that. So shut down the virtual machine. And I should have, pre-staged some files or some PowerShell commands in order to make that a little bit more friction-free. So my Nano VHDX is the path, or is the name for the virtual hard disk. And now I want to add some packages. The packages means the capabilities or the roles and features that a Nano server currently can have, and which is copied over into the base package path. So, compute means your Nano server can be a hypervisor, right? Your Nano server could be a container host, right? We say yes for a virus scanner on a Nano server, right? So the Defender is the virus scanning engine that you could run on a Nano server. You could make it a DNS server. You could also make it a failover cluster. You could run IIS on it. These are the driver packages for the hardware drivers. You could make it a file server and whatnot. So think about that a Nano server can be, or that the number of roles and features will grow over the time, because it takes the product teams, quite some time to build the roles that are capable of be run in a Nano server without any GUI restriction. All right. Okay. So I have here what you would need to make the Nano server work, or add a package, which is you mount the VHDX file, You add the packages into it. You commit the changes, and then you're hooking it up back into your virtual machine. Okay, so I think that's not that interesting here. I want to talk a little bit about how to manage Nano Server, right? And the best way to do is to use PowerShell. So I'll do a short demonstration of how to administer my Nano Server using PowerShell. So let me short recap. Okay, good. So connecting to your Nano Server, you could either do it with PowerShell remoting, but with Windows Server 2016, there's something new coming out, which is PowerShell Direct. So that means you do not have to have a network connection to that virtual machine in order to remotely manage it from the host. You can directly jump into the virtual machine from the host using PowerShell Direct. So what's the name of my box, which was my Nano? You need to have the name. It should be running, of course. So my Nano 5, what was the name again? 518. So I'm getting asked for administrative credentials. So this might not work because, well, it did. So you see the GUI changed a little bit. It went away from the logon screen, and now I'm connected to my Nano Server, which is get me the host name of my Nano Server, which I typed it in here correctly. It's my Nano 0815. Get the date of that box, which is currently Pacific Standard Time, which is this is the standard time it takes for a Nano Server installation. Deviates a little bit from my local time here. And I can do something like, for example, like ipconfig to get the IP address of my Nano Server. Okay, obviously it currently does not have one, but it has a network. So in order to prove what I've said, that you don't need a network connection, get net adapter. Yeah, not net adapter. So that my current net adapter is enabled. So I disable it. Yes. So even with a disabled net adapter, I can work and I can still, get the date and do the administration of my Nano Server, right? So there is PowerShell on a Nano Server, which is quite handy in order to administrate it. But the PowerShell is relying on the .NET Framework. .NET Framework has some components that rely on GUI components, which means you cannot have the full .NET Framework on a Nano Server. So getting the commands that are possible on a Nano Server, which is quite a bit. I mean, you can do lots of stuff here. Let me count that and get it into the into relationship. So you have 793 PowerShell commands on a Nano Server versus a little bit more on a full-blown Windows server, like 1,970. So there is a reduced set in administration possible, but you still can use the PowerShell remoting in order to do most of the stuff that you experience to do on a full-blown server. So, and well, basically that's, I got more to show, but I don't want to spoil the time. I'm already done. There's lots of more information out there if you want to see more. I'm doing a talk about Nano Server on a conference that is up in May, which is the Cloud and Data Center Conference, which is in Düsseldorf on May the 12th. So if you want to go there, that might be a good opportunity. We spent a little bit more time then on Nano Server than we had the chance today. And also, shameless plug, but this is the sponsor note, so you have to endure some advertising here. I'm doing a full-day workshop, which is free of cost, which is focusing on Hyper-V on Windows Server 2016 technical preview, and we also dedicate one section for Nano Server. So if you want to spend a full day playing with the product, we bring the hardware, you bring the time and the passion, then this would be a event to go, which is on the 2nd of June in Nuremberg and on the 23rd of June in Cologne. So, and with that, can we have some questions, Sanders?
We have time for one question, yeah.
I have time for one question, so make your choice.
There's one here in the back.
Okay.
So this looks really interesting. I'm wondering if you'll be able to manage your Nano server with the shiny new Bash for Windows 10 stuff, or if it's PowerShell only.
Good question. Well, I would really, or let me put it this way. Who do you think will be the biggest customer for Nano Server?
People who want to run Bash.
Okay, and Microsoft Azure, right? So with this, I would think that we want to make the administration experience as seamless as possible, because that was we got really hard punishment and we were really bashed for server core because it's so ugly to manage, right? So we don't want to see the next server variation dying because of a bad management. So I don't have the exact details about it, but I would really doubt them not doing it, right? But it's a good question. Thank you. Thank you for your time. I hope this was useful.